Sunday the 5th of February, Stewardship and Financial Giving. In the Gospel, Matthew 13, verses 44 to 46. There's a story of two brothers, one a bachelor, the other married. And together they owned a farm whose fertile soil yielded an abundance of grain. Half the grain went to one brother, and half to the other. All went very well at first. Then, every now and then, the married man began to wake with a start from his sleep at night and think, "This isn't fair. My brother isn't married, he's all alone, and he gets only half the produce of the farm. Here I am with a wife and 5 children, so I have all the security I need for my old age. But who will care for my poor brother when he gets old? He needs to save much more for the future than he does at present, so his need is obviously greater than mine." And with that, he would get out of bed, steal over to his brother's place with a sack full of grain on his back and pour it into his brother's granary. The bachelor brother, too, began to get the same attacks. Every once in a while he would wake from his sleep and say to himself, "This simply isn't fair. My brother has a wife and 5 children, and he gets only half the produce of the land. Now, I have no one except myself to support. So it is just that my poor brother, whose need is obviously greater than mine, should receive exactly as much as I do." And then he would get out of bed and walk over to his brother's and pour a sackful of grain into his brother's granary. One night, they got out of bed at the same time and ran into each other, each with a sack of grain on his back. Many years later, after their death, the story leaked out. And so when the townsfolk wanted to build a church, they chose the spot at which the 2 brothers met, for they could not think of any place in the town that was holier than that one. What did they live for, these 2 brothers? They lived for themselves and the other. Good stewards of what they had, they were, and it drove them to share. I'd like to look at this word stewardship. The story from Matthew's Gospel is 2 brief and simple parables. They're only 1 verse each. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, and the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. Almost always Jesus uses a metaphor when he talks about the kingdom of heaven, because he likens it to his kingdom, and he's likening the kingdom to everyday life. And so Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like, and almost always he uses a metaphor because he likens it, his kingdom, to life, to everyday life. And so the kingdom of heaven is not so much a place to which we go one day when we die, but a living reality, a now thing, a current thing, and not so much a place, but a condition of existence, which is defined by relationship with the King. For the past 2 weeks, if you've been worshipping in this church, and again today, we've heard someone who lives life among us and worships here regularly say how what they give to God is linked to their relationship with the King. And that's because this concept of stewardship is at the core. And there's a relationship that happens in stewardship. In a kingdom, you have a king or a queen, you have a monarch, and they rule. And the king and the queen have subjects. And when the king or queen speaks, they say, "We would like our people to know," or something like that. The big thing about the king or the queen is they do not believe their subjects are equal to them. nor are they. They have power, and it just depends on how they use that power, which makes them good or bad in history. But there's nothing the subjects can do, really, certainly in our day and age, to dethrone them. In the old days, war would dethrone a king. Because, you see, a monarchy is not a democracy. So there's a relationship that happens between the king, the queen, and the subjects. It's important because relationship with God, you see, is not equal. We can choose if we want it or not. But once we choose it, it's a loving relationship, but not equal. Jesus is the king of the kingdom, and so he protects and he loves and he teaches and he relates to the subjects, if you like. But I remain the subject, and he continues as king. So people have all kinds of relationships with Jesus, intimate relationship with Jesus, but he remains the king. And I'd want a relationship because I want life, and Jesus gives life. And the concept of stewardship is dependent on this. I wondered if stewardship was one of those religious terms, like fellowship, or tea after the service, or pew bulletin, which a non-churchgoer wouldn't understand at all. But in fact, it's not. Wikipedia says that the word stewardship is used in a more general way to refer to a responsibility to take care of something belonging to someone else. And therein often lies the problem. Do I believe that my life, my health, my possessions, my ability to work, what I earn, belongs to someone else? That someone being God. Or do I believe that it belongs to me? I struggle with this one, because when I'm thinking about it deliberately, I say yes, all that I am, all that I have, belongs to God. And that's not just because of what I do as a vocation and a living. But when I've worked all night or all year and I got my bonus, that's if you get a bonus, then that's what it is. And that's what they call it, my bonus. So Shell or Suncor or Syncrude or the municipality doesn't call you in and say, well done, good and faithful servant, here's God's bonus. Or here's the bonus. But it's given to you and said, this is your bonus, or this is your salary check. And you see, the jump from my possession to just taking care of something is a very mature one. And often it only happens when I or my loved ones have a near miss with death, or I have some kind of encounter with life or death, in which I might realize, why all this? What is the meaning? What is the purpose? Who does it belong to? Or my relationship with God deepens or is challenged in a particular way through God's action and gift. And I feel ashamed at how I hold for myself what I have, especially my money and my possessions. So what will move me to the place of realizing that what I have, whether it's a lot or whether it's a little, it doesn't matter. What will move me to the place of realizing that what I have is not mine, only moving me off the throne of life and inviting God onto the throne. Being able to say, who is king for me? Am I in the kingdom? Do I live like a subject in the kingdom? Do I really believe that what I have is something that is entrusted to me and I'm looking after it for someone else? We can get so tangled up about giving and percentages of giving and money and fear of never having enough, and what does God say, and does God say this or does God say that, and very often about this is what God says and this is what God says and the scripture says it and so on. and get so tied up with greed and the church and the law, this and that. Whereas none of it matters. Only, who is king for me? And do I live in the kingdom? And if I do, I'm only taking care of what belongs to someone else, the king. At that point, my treasure is where my heart is. And there's only one person with whom I need to argue this through: God. Do you recall me saying some months ago in a series on commitment that what are the things which have my devotion, the things that I will not miss, the things to which I feel so much part that almost nothing will stop me being there or doing them? That is what I love with all my heart and my soul and my mind. That is what I worship. That's where my treasure is. That is where I will be. And that is where I will give. Amen. And so today is the third of the testimonies of people who live and work in this congregation about the relationship between them and the King and what that has to do with giving.
Today I'd like to focus on why I believe in financial stewardship. But before I start, I really want to look at the importance of Consecration Sunday. Consecration Sunday helps us to examine our personal commitment to financial giving. Our focus on what is God calling me to give and not what the church needs. I also want to remind you about the celebration luncheon next week, February 12th, and hope as many of you will be able to attend. This is a very special occasion, so please remember to take your family and friends. Why do I believe in financial stewardship? I know the church needs money, but it's hard to say the church needs my money, my hard-working money, when I consider that my contribution is only a tiny fraction of million or even billions of church giver will be given this year, next year, or as the case might be. The church will not go under if I do not give. And that's my belief. And I know that's the belief of others. But what if others think about it in much the same way as I do? So then why do I give? Giving brings joy, knowing that I can touch several others, touching the lives of people near and far, and for those persons whom have never seen, who have never been in contact with. I look at giving to the church and giving to God in particular as a way of giving to my friends or even a small child a gift and not giving your best. You don't feel good about it. But when you give your best, you feel very good. It gives you that sense of joy that you're creating an impact on someone's life. The second reason why I give is that it strengthens my relationship with God. Faith in knowing there is more than enough. There's more than enough. And I can give you an example of when I started to give. And it was back in Jamaica, before coming to Canada, or even considering to come to Canada. I know I had a lot of expenses. I know I had to save a lot of money. And so given that proportion of giving, which I always know that 10% of giving is, basically it's in the Bible, but it was very hard to give 10%, especially when I have other needs that needed to be fulfilled. I had to save an exorbitant amount of money in order to come to Canada. And so when I decided to give, it was not about giving to the church, neither was it about giving to the pastor. It was about giving to God and making that personal commitment that, God, I'm going to give this to you. I'm going to give this amount to you. And this represents 10% of my income. And I'm going to be giving this to you. And I'm going to be stepping out in faith because I know you're going to take care of all that I need to take care of. And so I went and I gave wholeheartedly. And now I can say I was able to come to Canada. I was not one day without. I was able to finish my master's degree. And even after, when I finished my master's degree, I was able to get a job right after. And I've never been without. And so that's a blessing to see how financial giving can work for you as an individual. When you see how God works in your life, it also enables you to grow spiritually. So I have grown spiritually, being able to talk to God, to present my needs, and to thank God for the things that He has done in my life. So financial giving to me is to give wholeheartedly, to focus primarily on what God is calling me to give, and not so much what the church needs. The church will need a lot, but it's my personal commitment to give to God. The conviction going forward for giving is that God has the greatest potential to change, improve, and enrich the lives of people. It starts with me. I believe in giving to the church to enable to do the work of God and to help Christians to grow spiritually. This is a joy that I always want to share. So, as Consecration Sunday approaches, remember, next week, very important. Let us not lose sight of the importance of it. It is an opportunity for us to grow spiritually and experience great joy, knowing that we are making a contribution to helping others like ourselves. Help to grow the ministry of God. Do not forget the celebration luncheon next week. Bring as many of your family. This is a catered meal. Brenda is still collecting the reservation cards. If you do not fill out a card last Sunday, please do so and submit it today. For those of you whose card is filled out, please take the time for prayer and meditation on this question. What percentage of my income is God calling me to give? Think about it. What percentage of my income is God calling me to give? Boy,